Welcome to our values-based education meet, focusing this time on caring for learners. We're very conscious that after COVID, learners are going to have a lot of issues in coming back to school. So this session is really aimed to help teachers and staff involved at schools to help manage the quite stressful and unexpected impact that COVID is having on the children. Last week our session was aimed at caring for the teachers and for the staff, and all of these are on our website if you want to see the past sessions. So with no further ado, I just wanted to welcome Neil and Jane Hawkes. Neil is the founder of Values-Based Education, and Jane is one of our trustees. Sue Webb is the CEO of, is the Chief Executive Officer of, Executive Director of Values-Based Education. And so I'm going to pass over to our CEO, who's Bridget Knight. Bridget, over to you.
Thank you so much. And as ever, how absolutely joyful to see everybody here this morning. And I'd like to extend a special welcome to Sam Goddard, who on my screen is sitting next to me. So Sam, welcome. We're going to hear from Sam a bit later about forest schooling. But today, yes, our focus for this morning is about caring for children and how very apt. Because, of course, a key aspect of values-based education is that pronounced care for our children, as well as for ourselves, as well as for other people. Caring for children in values-based education is a central tenet, and the care and the concern, compassion are needed right now, as we all know, in the midst of this pandemic. And when children return to school in September and forevermore. So what could be a better topic for our talk this morning? So in thinking about this, I think it's important to say that, of course, with a values-based approach, the focus is on that real immersion in the language and the culture, the behaviours, the values. And it's through that we learn to act with care and consideration, with respect and kindness. We know that we are valued, so we can value ourselves. And that puts us in a place where we're able to value others in our world. So I see this as a positive cycle, and each part strengthens and nurtures the others. And the overall effect is, of course, to give a nurturing to humanity. Now, more than ever, arguably, all our children all over the world need to know that they're not forgotten. And schools have been finding the most creative ways to reach out to their children. And after all, for so many, it's been such a long time that they haven't actually been with us in the school community. Schools are doing amazing things. They're having Zoom meetings like this one for their children. They're doing online teaching, phone calls home, sending little gifts and mementos, visiting at the end of the gate with food parcels sometimes, and just finding all sorts of different and creative ways to connect with children. In England, since yesterday and before, I guess, our thoughts have been turning very much to September and the big return to school, which was announced. And it made me recall so vividly that first day back feeling. You know, when, do you remember it, putting on your uniform and it feels really stiff and unnatural after all your holiday clothes, and maybe your school shoes have been given an extra polish, and you're feeling a bit sort of fresh and ready to go, but also that feeling in your tummy of anticipation and perhaps a mix of apprehension and excitement. I have to say, I still get it. You know, 50 plus years on, it's still so vivid to me, that first day back feeling. And that's going to be even more pronounced, surely, isn't it, for all of us, for staff and children as we return in September. And of course, teachers are thinking about catch up for their children, thinking about the work and the skills and the knowledge base that children have been missing. But I think a values-based curriculum and a values-based approach will really give honour and attention to at least 5 other considerations. So I just wanted to highlight those with you today, and to hear back from you perhaps about how much they resonate with you as we find our way forward. The first and foremost thing to say is it's about you and me, but by which I mean that the person-to-person aspect of teaching is just so critical here. We think when we teach that we're imparting knowledge, but we know that what we're actually doing is connecting human to human with each of our children. Neil would say, I think, soul to soul. It's exactly what we're doing. And we know, because it's been so well researched from such a range of perspectives, that relationships with a significant other, relationship with your teacher, as well as people beyond your family, are of pivotal importance. And we know that it's that relationship that will have both the immediate and the long-term impact on the children in our care. And we know that it will have an impact in terms of well-being, in terms of personal and social identity, and in terms of our ability to learn and to absorb the experiences that come towards us. So by being a real authentic role model for the children of the characteristics of a developed person, being an example of someone who's being able to be reflective, be socially and emotionally skilled, be imaginative and responsive, we're giving children an essential component to all the aspects of teaching in our planned teaching time. So I think that's the first and foremost thing to say. It's us as people, and it's our children as people. The second I've called a soothing path, and Henry James, the author many of you will know, said, "Be kind, be kind, be kind." And his words, of course, have been echoed by the wisest people throughout time, because we know kindness is going to soothe the pathway through for our children as they return to school and as they continue in the schooling under our care. Talked already about how for many of them this return to school would be filled with apprehension. There'll be new effects that the pandemic has brought alongside for these children to cope with for many months to come. And kindness has got to be the only way forward. In the best traditions of schooling, the best traditions of early years schooling in particular, I think we need to really tune into children in this period and walk side by side with them, their learning. And I would just suggest that whichever value your school is focusing on when you return to school in September, ours will be care, which is very apt in this case, that we use that to really create opportunities and to engage directly and indirectly with the children as people and their families too. Use our assembly times to tell stories, discuss with children and give them the values-based messages that will reaffirm them. And Mick Waters, if he were here, would say this is every moment of every day in our curriculum. This is our curriculum is throughout the day and not just in the set parts of the lessons. So a soothing path, connecting with children human to human, soul to soul, giving opportunities, this is the third one, opportunities for play and the imagination. And Sam's going to be talking very much about this aspect a little later on. But the kind of play, I would suggest that some of our children won't have had the opportunity to have very much of in recent months. The kind of play that can only happen in community with others. And just simply that enjoyment of being with other people. You know, I would just say, let's fill our spaces with laughter and joy. Let's use the time on the field, the time in the classroom to create as much joy and give as many opportunities for the imagination as we can. Let's use our reflective and creative visualizations for our quiet times to be filled with positivity too. And then number 4, and arguably this is the most important of all, I think we need to make time for children to tell their story, whatever story that may be, and in whatever way that needs to form. You know, for some children, that will be a quiet reveal over time, won't it? For some children, they're going to need to tell their story up front and direct and day one, you know, 9 o'clock first day in. But different people hold their stories differently, don't they? We all do. And, you know, each of us, we're all living a story, and that story is ours alone. We're the authors of our own story. I've been very struck by an author, Phillida Salmon, who wrote a book called Living in Time. And in that book, she stressed the importance of being able to tell our story to someone at, you know, at regular points in our lives, to validate our story, because our story has even greater meaning, of course, when it's shared. And I think that point about everybody needing someone else who can validate their story and make sense, help us make sense of what's happened to us is really, really important for this particular time in everybody's lives. So a suggestion along with that for all of us, you know, self included here, making space for that emerging story to be told in artwork, in the joy of physical activity, news, show and tell, the P4C discussions, and in quiet reflection, writing and drawing. I mean, let's help our children see that they're bringing with them a new story, and that this is valued and valuable in our eyes. Okay, and then the final thought I had, number 5, enrich their paths. So I've talked about soothing their paths in, and now let's really grasp this opportunity to really make the best of what we know the best curriculums, the best teaching brings for children. Let's give them something that will take them beyond the COVID time, of course. And I think let's help them to see that all these experiences that we've had, tough ones, beautiful ones, all the ones in between as well, Let's help them see that all that helps us connect with life, with each other and with our world. So, nothing needs to be wasted. We've all been through this incredibly challenging time, and the resonances of that will go on, but it's still part of our life, isn't it? So let's to see that those things, when we meet them with our values, when we meet them with joy, when we meet them with courage, kindness, care, nothing needs to be wasted. It all helps us to build and shape the people who we are. So really, finally, let's just take this as an opportunity and make a curriculum that nurtures our inner curriculum, gives attention to our self-esteem and well-being and our inner worlds of the imagination and the emotions. And let's help to make this the most joyful time as we enter into another phase of all our lives. So on that note, I'm going to invite Jane to lead us into a time of peace and reflection through some creative visualization, which I know she's going to do beautifully. And then we're going to hear from Sam about how we can perhaps make some of those words I've just been saying come to life in the open air and the outdoors. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Beautiful, beautiful words that you've shared with us this morning. So I'm going to invite us to take a little pause to be. So find that comfortable seat for yourself. Really feel yourself held and supported by whatever you're sitting on. And if you're happy to, either close your eyes or just let your gaze soften. And just for the next few minutes, we're going to be really connecting to our inner world. And as we begin this journey, I'm just going to offer you a concept that whatever is happening in our inner world, we often manifest that in our outer world. So as we go into this reflection, there's something about connecting to your inner world, so that when you do meet the children, when you do meet the parents, when you do meet anybody in the community, you're offering as peaceful an inner world as you can. So let's start though by just beginning to notice our breath, constant companion all through our life. Just allow yourself to breathe slightly more deeply. Maybe just slowing this down a little bit too. And then begin to notice any thoughts, any activity that's in your mind. And I'm inviting you to find a way to welcome it. Welcome it, whatever it is. Open your heart to your thinking. Maybe you're aware of any emotional sensations that are around in your physical body too. And see if you can find a way to welcome this too. Often we fight our emotional world, we fight our physical pain. What happens when you begin to open your heart to it and welcome it from a compassionate space? And the stories that perhaps we're holding at the moment as well. How can we hold our story from a place of compassionate openness, welcoming, so that we begin to accept our story, both recent maybe historical as well. And begin to make a really beautiful connection with your inner world. Just allowing yourself to notice whatever your inner world brings to your attention will be important for you. And finding ways of holding this in the spaciousness of you with compassion, with curiosity.
Hello?
And finding your innate creativity to share whatever it is that you might need to share. And then allowing the people around you to share whatever they might need to share with their innate creativity too. So as you reflect on how maybe you tell your story, you can then allow yourself to manifest the spaciousness, the calmness, the curiosity, and the compassionate place for the people you work with, the children you work with too, to share their stories safely. So as we come to the end of this little reflection, I want to share a quote from one of my favourite stories. It's a Winnie the Pooh story, and little Piglet and Pooh are sitting together. And little Piglet says to Pooh, "How do you spell love?" And Winnie the Pooh says, "You don't spell love, you feel it." So now, just allow yourself to reconnect with your physical body sitting in your chair. Maybe you begin to bring a little bit of movement into your body. Take a few deeper breaths, and when you're ready, allow yourself to be reconnected with the beautiful faces I can see on this screen, the beautiful people that are joining us both now and in the future. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Jane. Always actually don't enjoy following up from your reflections because I always feel so calm. I'm not ready to engage in discussion, but that's where we are. So just echoing, if I may, what's been spoken so far, that often when we're dealing with children coming back, there's sort of huge demands to focus on the children that are really loud and in extreme need, and they demand attention and sometimes take it away from most of the other children. When what I think I'm hearing from Bridget and Jane so far is that we need to find a way to allow children to feel a sense of normality and security so that things can go on as normal, this peacefulness that Neil talks about. And so Jane, when Jane talks about offering peace to the inner world, through the inner world, it touches very much on this sort of basic stability. And one way that's so important for kids to have this sense of normalcy is to be validated, and validated not just by others, but in their own eyes. They are validated and they feel validated. So Bridget's sense or ideas of allowing children to tell their stories and to be heard in their own way is part of that validation, part of that importance, enjoying being with others and filling a school with laughter and joy. I can't think of a better way to provide security and safety for children coming back. So if I may, we're now going to move over to Sam. Let me welcome Sam. Sam is involved with an initiative in the UK called Forest Schools. And Forest Schools does some amazing things with getting children in nature. And it's really for schools to help get children out of the classroom and to help support them in play and in nature. So Sam, if I can pass over to you to tell us a little bit about Forest Schools and how they can help with children's well-being. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Neil. Nigel, sorry. Yeah, brilliant. And really lovely visualization. I always drifted off to somewhere quite different then. So yeah, welcome. My name's Sam Goddard, and I am involved with, as Nigel said, I'm involved with Forest School in the UK. I'm sitting here today in the office in a very unnatural environment, but usually we're out in the woods. So what I would like to talk to you about this morning, and what Bridget's asked me to talk about, is a little bit about what Forest School is, how it's kind of implemented in the UK, and also how the Forest School approach and the Forest School ethos can link really well with the values-based education philosophy. And that's something that we've done some work on in Herefordshire with Bridget and with Sue and with Anne Phillips and various other people. And I think that there's a really lovely fit between the values and the ethos and the way that we practice Forest School in the woods and the values-based education that you are implementing in your settings around the world. So I'm really interested to explore that a bit more with you, and then obviously hopefully this conversation can continue between the two approaches in the future. So very quick introduction to me. I'm Sam. I trained at Anne Phillips School in Kington. I did my Forest School training there 11 years ago, possibly now. Very kindly supported by the school where my children were initially, and happened that I was also interested in Forest School at the same time as Anne. So I did my training then and started working, and I'm still there at Kington when I can be every week on a Wednesday. And that was my first Forest School job. So I'm very much indebted to Anne Phillips for putting me on this path. And then things have developed and grown over the last 10, 11 years from very simply going out and taking children out every week to do Forest School sessions in local schools. And I've also been then involved in training and CPD and development, and now run a company called Cambium Sustainable, who are one of the leading Forest School training companies in the UK. We work with around 50 associate trainers who are based all over the UK. We've delivered training overseas. We've been to China and done training there. And now we're very much involved in trying to promote the Forest School ethos on a national and an international level to all schools, because we believe that Forest School is a way to support children and to encourage natural play, exploration and development, regardless of where those children are from or what their social economic background is. What kind of life story they've got, being in a natural environment and being outdoors and engaging with play are fundamental things that children need, regardless of where they've come from. So I'm really passionate about supporting schools and settings to be able to offer this, I think, quite a revolutionary approach to education. So the first thing I'm going to do is just give you a very brief outline of what Forest School is, and talk about the 6 Forest School principles, which have been introduced in the UK by the Forest School community, and they help us to define what we actually mean when we talk about Forest School. There is a lot of misunderstanding around what Forest School is. Some of you may be aware of Forest School, some of you may not be. But it's one of those terms that can get used in a lot of different contexts, and sometimes it's used as a way, my cynical brain says that it's used as a marketing tool for schools to sell their services, essentially. And you've got a lovely photo on the website of some children by the fire, and that's as far as it goes. It's a tokenistic approach. That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in the real deep sort of pedagogical approach to outdoor learning, which we've defined within these 6 principles. I'll read you the 6 principles and we'll have a little discussion about that, and then I'm going to move on to talk about how Forest School and values-based education fit together. So as I say, the Forest School principles were developed by the Forest School community in around 2012. And they set out the sort of basis of what Forest School is. The first one is that Forest School is a long-term process of regular sessions rather than a one-off or infrequent visit. So that means that woodland or outdoor site on a weekly basis for a long period of time, and really the longer the better. So the more familiar the children can become with that environment, and the more comfortable and confident they can become with that environment, the bigger the benefits to the children, and the more that process becomes internalized for them and they become confident and comfortable within that environment. The cycle of planning, observation, adaptation and review link to each session. So there is a process. We do plan sessions, but the planning is done around the interests of the children that we're working with. And the planning is also done on a sort of weekly basis. So we tend not to have long-term plans at Forest School because we don't know which direction those sessions are going to take based on the children that are there and the interest that they display and the type of learning that they are engaged with. Second principle, Forest School takes place in a woodland or a natural environment to support the development of a relationship between the learner and the natural world. Now, we all know that not all schools have a woodland on their doorstep, but most schools do have some area of outdoor space, of wild space, a few trees in the corner of a field where we can create a natural environment for the children to play and to learn. And really that's what it's about. It's about creating that environment which is as natural as possible, which is as wild as possible if we can. So we try not to overmanage our sites. And it links very much into playwork theory, where we're talking about theories around loose parts and compound flexibility. So things where we can take a variety of objects, and natural objects mostly we use, and we allow the children to play, experiment, explore those objects in their own way. So rather than using manufactured resources or educational tools, we tend to use natural resources and open-ended resources that the children can be creative with, and they can use them in their own way. Thirdly, Forest School uses a range of learner-centered processes which create a community for being, learning and development. And this comes back to what Bridget was saying about play. So we use a lot of play, and really we don't have to create play for children. We all know that children play naturally. It's innate, it's something that they have to do in order to develop normally and develop their skills and their knowledge about the world. So we create a space for play, and then we allow the children to play and to engage with those environments in their own way. Forest School aims to promote holistic development of all those involved, which fosters resilient, confident, independent and creative learners. Now, who wouldn't want resilient, confident, independent and creative learners? Those are some key skills, aren't they? Certainly for school children, but also for later life as well. And through the process of holistic development. So we don't focus on specific outcomes or specific curriculum areas, but we look and we're interested in the overall development of that person, that child, as they go through the process of Forest School with us. Fifth principle, Forest School offers learners the opportunity to take supported risks, which are appropriate to the environment and to themselves. And risk is very important for children, as we know. To be able to learn, children have to take risks, either emotional risks, sometimes physical risks. They have to take risks in their friendships, in interactions with other people. And it's by taking those risks that they are able to build their skills and their confidence to set them up for a lifetime of learning. And Forest School is run by qualified Forest School practitioners who continuously maintain and develop their professional practice. So that's what we're interested in here at Canby, and we train teachers and we support them to take those next steps in becoming a Forest School practitioner and implementing that approach in their own setting. So there's lots more information about that on the Forest School Association website and on our website, and with permission I will share that with Nigel so he can disperse some of that information to the rest of you after the talk today. So when these guidelines are followed, the benefits can be absolutely huge. And especially when we come back to Bridget's talk about mental health and well-being, about supporting children to be able to tell their story, to be able to speak in front of a group, to be able to really, I suppose, recognize and find out what they are interested in as an individual. Very interestingly, Bridget, when you were speaking about the kind of core values of values-based education and how we can sort of smooth that transition back into school for children, the 3 Forest School rules kind of came back into my head. We have 3 basic rules which we introduce at the beginning of each session, and they are respect yourself, respect others, and respect the environment. And those are our simple 3 rules. So we're looking after ourselves, we're acknowledging how we feel, and we're looking after other people, and we're looking after and respecting the environment that we're working in. And basically those 3 rules cover all of the health and safety, all of the social interactions, and they help to create that community of learning and development, which I've mentioned. So what we tend to do is, as I say, we use open-ended resources, we use sticks, we use mud, water, tarpaulins, rope, planks of wood. Some Forest School settings will have tires or pallets, and we also use tools and fire as ways that children can explore and experiment with the environment. There is obviously a lot of health and safety that goes with good Forest School practice as well. So there is some adult-led teaching, if you like, of how to use tools, fire, rope, things like this, which could be potentially dangerous resources. But we teach the children how to use them so that they can gain the confidence and they can become proficient in using those tools, and then they can use those tools to carry out their own activity, to decide what they want to do and to follow their own interest. So very much we're putting our trust in the children, and this is another reason why Forest School has to be long-term, because we have to build a trusting relationship with those children, and they have to trust us to support them in taking those risks. So if we come on now to the project that we delivered in Herefordshire with Bridget and others around the link, the overlap, if you like, between values-based education and Forest School. It was a funded project that ran for, it was 2 sessions, I think, wasn't it, Bridget, that we've done so far, with families from local schools who came to the woods. So it wasn't a long-term project, or it wasn't yet a long-term project. There is talk about extending it. But they came to the woods with us, with their families, and they were able to just start to explore the site and explore the way in which values and Forest School link. So we try not to kind of ram it down their throats too much when we're at Forest School, but we allow the children and the families to explore and to make those connections by themselves. So a very big part of what we do is displaying the values that we want the children to explore or to pick up on through our own actions and our own way of interacting with the children. And that comes down to role modeling. It comes down to having a positive attitude, having that kind of growth-based growth mindset where we can see every failure, if you like, as an opportunity for children to grow and to modify their plans or modify their thinking. So something like den building, which is a classic Forest School activity, is a great example of how children are able to problem solve in the woods using natural resources, and they're able to slowly modify their thinking and their plans and their communication and their social development in order to come up with a solution to a particular problem. And that's usually a problem that they have set themselves. So in our project in Herefordshire, we had small kind of introductory taster activities which we introduced to the children because they were new to the site. And then they were able to explore and take those activities further and develop them themselves and in their own way. And really that's the core of what we do at Forest School. We offer hooks, so we offer starting points, and then we allow the children to explore and to extend that learning themselves. So I just wanted to sort of mention a few things, and then we're going to have a look at a couple of photos from that project. And one was to do with coming back and transitioning back into school in September. Now, obviously, the government guidelines and the health and safety people are saying that the children are safer outdoors at the moment. We should be taking our classes and our learning outdoors in small groups, all of which just fits really lovely, really well with Forest School. And also thinking about supporting the children's learning and play and development after this long break, where, as Bridget said, some of them might not have had much opportunity to meet up with other people, with other children, with friends. And for me, there's a lot of talk about catching up on curriculum and catching up on missed learning that hasn't happened over the last few months. But for me, the important thing is going to be catching up on the play that children have missed, and the socialization and that ability to play with other children in an unstructured way, where the adult is there to support the play but not to intervene unless necessary. And I think that's something that Forest School can really offer in the kind of current climate. And I think it comes down to rebalancing education. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, this is a massive opportunity for us all to reflect on what we do, and to think really carefully about what the priorities are for our education systems. And, you know, this is a big question, but it comes down to what we want children to learn when they're with us. You know, do we want them to come out at the end of primary school or secondary school with a certain amount of knowledge that they've gained? Or do we want them to come out as well-rounded individuals who are able to cope with the challenges and the flexibility of life as they go forward into a very unknown future? And for me, that's why I do what I do. It's not all about the tools and the fire. It's about creating that atmosphere and that environment where children can explore some of those things.
Sam,
yes,
I wonder if I could just break in for a minute. We're starting to run out of time, and I'm conscious that you've got a slideshow.
That's fine. Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Can we leave the slideshow till after we finish this meeting? So for anybody who wants to watch it afterwards can do so. But let's make it available on the website, so that anyone watching this later or anyone who's here but who can't wait afterwards can see
That's
it.
fine. Yeah.
So that way we've got time for the other speakers. So thanks.
No
so
problem
Sam, I just want to sum up. Really, really fascinating what you're saying. I already know about forest schools, but the breadth of what you talked about is just breathtaking. The impact is just amazing. And just picking out just a couple of bits that you said, it's so clear why values-based schools and any schools that are looking to develop the whole child will be so interested in what you're doing. But you talked about building trust, which is such a key part of society at the moment, developing a community of learning, and offering a safe space for kids to take risk, which then develops in values-based terms to self-leadership. You can't lead yourself if you're not able to launch into the uncertain and to assess things properly. So just 2 or 3 attributes you mentioned, which are just extremely interesting for values-based schools. So Sam, thank you so much. Really interesting. We'll make your website available to people so they can and your contact details. So thank you so much for that talk. Really interesting. I just mentioned from the chat that there was a bit of discussion from the previous talks, and Vicky was talking about an organization called Jigsaw that has released a free recovery curriculum of 10 lessons. I think it's for primary school. We'll look it up further, but it's on the chat. She and a couple of other people have contributed to this. It's on the website is on the chat, but we'll also make it available for the people who are watching this video subsequently. It'll be in the box just below where you're looking at the video. So that it sounds a fantastic resource. And Anne mentioned how valuable she found some of the earlier talks, and she's going to use that at the start of her gathering for staff meetings as they come back to school, because it's so well put. So that's wonderful. Thank you. And a couple of Sam, just a couple of very positive feedbacks about what you talked about, and one Anne saying it's quite remarkable the impact on children, and she mentions on staff too. Diane says, thank you. It's so exciting. We're now forced to learn outside. I think she's quite looking forward to that. And Sue Jones says, you're truly inspiring, Sam. So thank you very much. So could I then finally move over to Neil Hawkes to take over the next part of this talk. Thank you. Neil?
Thank you very much, Nigel. You know, sometimes I'm sitting and I think, oh, I don't really want to say anything today, because the quality of what we've heard today has been absolutely outstanding. Bridget, first of all, my apologies earlier on this morning. I Zoom bombed you when you were having a staff meeting. I was setting up my computer, and I'd just come in from a run and I looked really tatty. So, so I hope I didn't scare any of your colleagues by just suddenly appearing. So thank you very much for that inspiring talk you gave this morning. I wish all teachers and leaders could have heard you speak this morning in the country and internationally. I thought there was so much in your 5 steps to think about. Sam, I think I met you once when you were teaching at school, when I visited Anne's school many years ago, about 10 years ago. So I've seen you before. And your words of wisdom were truly inspiring. I regret the title of Forest School in many ways, because it is education you're talking about. And sometimes it's like VbE, when you give something a title, it doesn't really do it justice. Those that were listening last week heard me talk about Vasily Sukhomlinsky, and I know, Sue Jones, you bought his book this week. And Vasily was talking about what you were talking about, Sam. In the 1950s, he believed all schools should actually be mainly based in the outdoors. He said moral education, developing virtues in children, really was a process that they achieved by being in touch with nature. Actually, and one of our big issues nowadays in the 21st century is that so many families are not really spiritually in touch with the environment. They haven't made that deep connection. No, I'm not blaming anybody, it's just a fact of how it is. So the richness that you are giving, I think, is superb. I just wanted to do something for just a couple of minutes. Some of you may have seen this before. I'm going to attempt, Nigel, to screen share. If it doesn't work, then oh well, that's the way it is going to be. I'm not touching the right things. There we are. Let's see if I can come onto this. Right. Right, Nigel, nod to me if you can see the screen. You can't. Oh, it's not going to work. Wait a minute. It says I'm screen sharing.
Yes. Are you able to go to the next slide? Because it's just possible that's what the issue is.
Yeah, I've just gone to it.
Oh no, it's a black screen, unfortunately. Could you, if you come out of the slideshow, we were actually able to read it without the full slideshow. So we can actually read that.
Well, that won't do it justice, really. But
can you play it though?
No, I can't play from there. I'm going to come out of this and show it another time, Nigel, when we've worked out how to do that. But if I take the analogy of what Sam was talking, I remember a few years ago, Jane and I were visiting a forest school in Herefordshire, Lee Batson's forest school, which many of you listening in that part of the world will know. And along that, with the group that was there that day, was a little girl, and she had had quite a challenging life. And we were watching the whole group of children that day. And what was amazing to Jane and myself was the incredible way that Lee Batson, and you won't mind me talking about him, made the connections, not only with that little girl, but with all the children. That deep connection that I think quality teachers make with children. Now that little girl had come into the world through no fault of her own and no fault of her family in many ways, but there were challenging circumstances in the home. And that little girl lacked confidence. Her behaviours showed distress. She would act out, she would appear to be difficult, uncommunicative, she would go withdrawn from time to time. All us educators have met children like that. As we learned about her circumstances, we learned that this really lovely child And may I emphasize that, because my belief is that when we all come into the world, we are absolutely wonderful. We're imbued with qualities, values such as cooperation. They're all there within us. The values are there with us. But as we go through life, when we're in circumstances as that little girl, it's as though the world comes round us and creates sort of a shell, and we're locked in that shell. And we have to decide, well, how are we going to manage our lives? So as we have more experiences, more shells come round us. And then we at secondary level, you may have seen children at secondary level, if they've had a lot of limiting experiences in their lives, then they really act out because they're desperate usually for being acknowledged and being noticed. And they can only be noticed in one way, and that is by playing up. But this what comes on to Lee and other teachers that I've watched in detail over the years. They are able to use what is fundamental in values-based education. They see the child as the potential of the child. They take the lid off the potential of the child. They don't see the child who is being difficult in any way or challenging. They are able to cut through those layers that the child has put round them, and they make this incredible connection. Bridget was saying, I use the word soul from side to side, and it is a sort of soul-to-soul connection. Or in our work in VbE, we say it's an authentic self to an authentic self. So you address the child in their authentic self state, and you make that connection. You use a lot of heart, not slushy heart, but really, you know what I mean, when someone is looking at you with open-hearted acceptance, unconditional positive regard, as Carl Rogers said. And it is that connection that teachers in values-based schools make. And I visit, along with a number of other people, lots of schools, and I go into schools in challenging circumstances, and the schools say, how can we solve the behaviour issues? And they don't realise that the behaviour issues actually start with the adults in the school. It's in your attitudes, how you connect. So when we think about caring for children, we have to go back to our schools, those of us who are returning to schools. And as all of you have been saying that have been speaking, let the children be. As Bridget said, listen to their story. It's the most important thing you can do. Listen to their story. Make those connections. Make them feel security, so that they can interact. And please, please, please do not do as various governments around the world are saying, catch up in literacy and numeracy. That can wait. What you need to do is catch up in relationships. Let the children re-establish their relationships with each other and with you, so that they can feel emotionally secure. Because we learn best when we're emotionally calm and in a safe place. And my colleague Simon from a special education is smiling, because I know he will agree with what I've just said. But those of us in special ed need to get that word out to mainstream too. I'm speaking tomorrow finally on a little community TV station in Manchester. And the host, Charmaine, has said, Neil, will you really be outrageous tomorrow? So I've said, yes, I'll be outrageous. She said, can you criticize the government? Yes, I'll criticize the government. Because it's not just criticism for criticism's sake, but it is challenging the status quo, challenging how things have been. We need to move education to a different position where we can actually help nourish children, so that humanity can survive on this planet into the future. Anyway, I'm passionate about that, as you can tell. But thank you again, Bridget and Sam, for a most enlightening morning. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed seeing my lovely friends on the screen in front of me today too. Thank you, Nigel.
Neil, thank you. This is largely brings us to the end of the session today. And Neil, if you're driving us forward with inspiration and becoming very vocal, what values-based education is very much about the gentle walking in, the legs and the actions that make this change. And I just picked out from what you said, this concept of values-based teachers cutting through the layers of external experience that represses the authentic child. And if that's what we do at a time of COVID, when they're coming back and they're frightened, disconnected, very unsure of the way things are going, I can't think of anything greater we can do than to help children through this time with their values, with care and with love. So thank you very much to everyone.